Have you ever been reading Revelation, you get to chapters 17 and 18, and you just kind of stop and think, wait a minute, these two chapters are describing a city called Babylon, but they feel like two totally different places. One is this religious harlot, just drunk on power, and the next is this massive global economic empire. It's a huge puzzle, right? But what if they're not two different cities at all? What if they're just two phases in the life of the very same city? So, here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to walk through the story chronologically. We'll start with the harlot's reign, then cover her violent overthrow, see the rise of the beast's global machine, and finally, make sense of the two very distinct judgments that fall on this one city. Okay, let's dive right in. The core of the problem is this. You open up Revelation 17, and it paints this picture of Babylon as a deeply corrupt religious system, and it's symbolized by a harlot. But then you flip the page to chapter 18, and suddenly it's this global economic superpower. Its collapse literally sends the entire world market into a tailspin. So how can it possibly be both? And that's the big question, the one that's had people scratching their heads for centuries. Are we looking at one city that goes through this radical identity shift? Or are these two totally separate entities that just happen to share the same name? Honestly, the answer changes everything about how you read this prophecy. Well, the key, it turns out, is to stop thinking about them happening at the same time. They're sequential. Just look at this timeline. Phase 1 is what we see in Revelation 17, this shaky, unequal alliance between the religious harlot and the political beast. That whole thing comes to a crashing halt with a midpoint coup, and that event kicks off Phase 2, the beast's own global economic empire from Revelation 18. It's one story told in 2x. All right, so let's jump into that first act and see how this whole story gets started. In the first 3.5 years of this end times period, what we have is this very fragile, very unequal partnership. Now, this image from the text is so powerful. The harlot is riding the beast. Think about that. She doesn't own him. She can't control him with sheer force. She's guiding him, steering him with the reins of ideology and her religious authority. She gives his rising political power legitimacy. It's a perfect picture of influence, not ownership. And this lays out the whole power dynamic perfectly. The harlot, the religious authority, uses her spiritual influence to seduce the world's political leaders. She gets them on her side, and by doing that, she gives the beast the moral and political cover he needs for his machine to grow long before it's strong enough to just rule by force alone. But, a partnership like this, built on convenience and deception, it was never going to last. The story takes this incredibly dramatic and violent turn right at the midpoint with a betrayal that is just shocking. So what happens that lets the beast go solo? Two huge things. First, he has what looks like a counterfeit resurrection. He survives a fatal wound, and this makes the whole world just worship him directly. He has his own religious credibility now. Second, he takes out his two main opponents, the two witnesses, proving he's politically unstoppable. Suddenly, he doesn't need the harlot's endorsement anymore. He has his own cult following and total power. And once he's independent, that alliance just shatters. The scripture here is incredibly graphic. The beast and his political allies, they turn on their former religious partner. And they don't just leave her, they violently hate her. They strip her of all her power and completely incinerate her system. It's a hostile, bloody takeover. So the harlot's religious system is gone, wiped out. The beast is now in total control, and he wastes no time. He immediately transforms Babylon into something brand new, and honestly far more sinister, the global headquarters for his totalitarian empire. The whole spiritual vibe of this city just shifts. It's no longer just a place of corrupt, hypocritical religion. Revelation says it becomes a literal dwelling place of demons. With the harlot out of the picture, it becomes the capital of an openly satanic cult, completely saturated with demonic power. The control mechanism changes too. It's not about religious fornication anymore, like in chapter 17. Now it's all about global commerce, which is the focus of chapter 18. The number one tool of this new empire is economic. Through his mark system, every bit of trade and finance on the planet is controlled from this one central hub. Okay, but wait a second. This is where people get stuck. Revelation 18 describes sailors out at sea mourning Babylon's fall. But if the city is inland, maybe like Jerusalem, how on earth is that possible? So here's the deal. Think of it in two ways. First, it's about administrative control. The city is the brain, the command center for the entire global economy. Second, the language is symbolic. It's what scholars call typological. It's using the real, historical fall of the ancient port city of Tyre as a literary blueprint to describe a massive economic collapse. The sailors are mourning because their whole supply chain, their entire network, just went dark because the command center got wiped out.
All right, this is where it all comes together, the grand finale. With this two-phase model in our minds, we can finally see crystal clear how one city faces two completely different and separate destructions.
So let's be super clear about this. There are two different destructions. The first destruction is of the harlot's religious system. And who does it? The beast himself, through political violence, right at the midpoint. The second, final destruction is of the entire economic city. And who does that? That's carried out directly by God through divine wrath at the very, very end.
And check out who's crying when the city finally falls. It's the kings, the merchants, the sailors, the world leaders, the billionaires, the supply chain managers. Their grief isn't about losing a religion. It is purely economic. They are weeping because the engine of their wealth and prosperity has just vanished in an instant.
And if you need to see it all in one place, here it is. Laying the two chapters side by side like this, the differences are just undeniable. Chapter 17, the main figure is a harlot who rides the beast. She's destroyed by the beast midway through. Chapter 18, the figure is an imperial city that is ruled by the beast, and it's destroyed by God at the very end. Case closed.
So in the end, it's not two different stories at all. It's one single, coherent, and frankly terrifying story of transformation. You have this same rebellious spirit, likely in the same location, that just morphs its form. It goes from a corrupt religious system that enables a dictator into that dictator's own totalitarian economic empire right before it faces its final, sudden judgment. And that leaves us with a pretty heavy question, doesn't it? If we understand this ancient prophetic pattern, where a compromised worldly religion literally paves the way for a global, controlling economic system, what does that suggest we should be watching for in the structures of power, religion, and commerce in our own world today?